All right, we're live, boys. Welcome to another episode of Bootleg Weekly. We don't have Steve, but we replaced him with somebody much more handsome and much more rich. Jesse, welcome.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Roy.
Not me, man.
All right, hey, man. I'm happy to be
with a
here.
fresh haircut. Roy, I see the haircut. I like it.
Looks trim, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It was time.
So what do you guys want to talk about today? Crypto or something? Bitcoin?
What's that all about?
Nothing's really happened in the market or crypto. So, kind of a boring, week. But
Last 48 hours have been Snoresville. It went up to 69K. It went down to the 50s almost. And then it went back up again. And
are you not entertained?
Huh?
Are you not entertained?
Oh, dude, that's what it feels like every day.
It's crazy. Like the pace at which the memes started, like immediately the bull run hasn't even fully gotten underway, and the memes just all the way. Oh, look who joined.
Oh, we got Tanner in here. Wow, it's a full house.
Late
as always.
Right?
Actually late. Okay. Actually late this time. My bad. I'm here.
So we're happy to have you.
Yeah, one second. Can you throw me backstage for a sec?
Bye.
We're breaking some of the rules of the Bootleg Weekly and inviting Tanner on this episode. So we might lose a couple of followers for that one.
Uh-oh.
You good?
Well, you guys are both Canadian, right? Is there a rule about how many Canadians you can have on a stream? I know they're really tight in Canada on YouTube.
It's a max of 2.
Oh, is it? Okay. All right, so we're safe.
To be fair, they wanted to defect to the United States, or at least I'm trying to convince them to. So they're honorary Americans.
There you go.
All right, Bitcoin. So, Jesse, you've been making these tremendous videos on Bitcoin, and just, I used to watch this guy on Bitcoin called Invest Answers, and he was really great. And now I've sort of started to watch the market recaps on your end.
Yeah, James is good. He's a good guy.
James is good. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff for us to talk about. I don't know where we want to start. Maybe we can start at the very beginning, Roy. I think you have some questions, and then we can sort of go from there.
Yeah. So everybody has their aha moment when you get it as far as crypto, and just kind of briefly, what was the aha moment for you guys? When did that happen, and just briefly why? So Tanner, you want to start?
Oh gosh.
We all own crypto here, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep. A little bit.
So my biggest fight, I had this conversation with Jesse, was that I loved the idea that this was potentially the only asset that did have a cap on the amount of inflation. And now Bitcoin is essentially still inflating right now. But it actually goes down over time, not up. So whenever this halving comes out, it's going to even go slower. But I think that I had a real problem with crypto because I didn't think that a reserve currency was going to give up its potential hierarchy and say, hey, this better thing is coming out and we're going to allow it. Anytime that there's been a transfer of a reserve currency or something like this, there's always kind of ended in a lot of bloodshed. So I definitely thought that there was going to be a massive crackdown. But I don't know the exact moment that I decided to pull the trigger on it, but a lot of laws were just sort of coming out that were really in defense of what Bitcoin was. And that gave me hope that, oh my God, the courts are doing exactly what they're designed to do and upholding something that should legally be here, regardless of its threat to potentially existing, controllers of the monetary system. So, yeah, I don't know the exact moment, but that switch, whenever I kind of had that switch that, the U.S. is doing the right thing by sort of pushing forward crypto, was a slam dunk.
Yeah, makes sense. Similar to me. Jesse, I think I've heard your story on that, but if you don't mind just sharing your aha moment, when you got it.
Yeah, I don't know if you have. I've had a few of them, a few different epiphanies over time. But so I first learned about it and really became interested from my father. He was talking about it, and he was talking about how I could use my graphic card to make money. And I was like, this sounds insane. Okay, whatever. And then I started looking into it, and then I started doing it, and I was like, whoa, did I just make like $3-4 today from having my graphics card? Like, how much power did that take? And so I learned about it really from Ethereum. Ethereum was hot. It was like March of 2017. And so that was the big one. And you could make stupid amounts of money. I invested $100,000 into mining equipment in a warehouse over that time till about like September or something. And I ran that for a while, and eventually I shut it down because I started to learn about how hard it was to run something like that without scale. And then also just I got like good energy rates, but they're so much better in other places around the world, and even in the US, even back then. And so there's just so many factors that were incorporated into it. And then I was doing the math, and I was like, I should just own this stuff. Like, I would have made way more money just owning Bitcoin or owning Ethereum than mining it. It's like the picks and shovels thing back in the gold mining days. Everybody went to go search for gold. The people that made all the money were like the prostitutes, the bar owners, the people that sold the picks. Everybody along the way made tons of money, but the guys mining for gold, like most of them didn't get anything. So I switched things up after that, and I got really interested into investing. And then, like, I don't know, I struggled pretty bad in the beginning. I think I was down like $46,000 in 2019. And then I had this wicked idea. I was like, you know what? I know this is real. I'm going to take some risk. I'm going to take out $100,000 in credit cards that are 0 to 8, like 18 months, 0% offers that had a 2 to 3% fee. I'm not condoning this. This is absolute insanity. People shouldn't take out debt to buy things or for investments. This is a super dangerous, sketchy thing. But that's what I did. And luckily it turned out really good. And I made a bunch of money off of that into 2020 and then 2021 and 2022. Even in 2022, I was up substantially that year. And then 2023 was amazing. I made tons of money. But that's where it started. It started from learning about Ethereum and mining with it, and then getting a warehouse. And I just got further hooked along the way, listening to really brilliant people talk about it and talk about our existing financial system and talking about all the things that could be wrong with Keynesian economics. And it just got me really fascinated in all of it. And I've just been continually expanding from there.
Yeah, it's the community is interesting because you have on one side just absolutely brilliant people, and then on the other side you have total degenerates. So
yeah, there's a meme about that.
It's
got like this really dumb like person who's got a low IQ over here, and then it's got like the average smart person, and none of them know anything about Bitcoin or use it at all. And then it's got like the really smart person, and they've got tons of it. So it's like the degens, and then the really super smart people that seem to own it, and then the people in the middle miss out.
Isn't that the joke though? It's like
yeah,
a higher IQ is correlated with more losses in the market because you tend to overthink. At least this is what I tell myself at night.
Sure.
But you overthink things, and you're more skeptical, you're more negative. You're like, oh, the US is never going to let go of their reserve currency or whatever, and then you maybe hold off in a year or two before you realize, oh wait, this is a real thing.
If you think you know too much in life, you can miss a lot. That's a very true statement. If you think you're way smarter than everybody else around you and you don't take time to listen to them, you could be in trouble.
And for me, that's one of the best things is just understanding there's a lot that I don't know. And this is a topic I'm not an expert on at all. But for me, the moment was in 2020. And I had a friend that I've known for a long time that I respect. And I was talking to him about this Bitcoin craze and just how it's backed by nothing and just, going off on it. And he's like, you need to check this. And so he actually gave me some of the information you guys did. And of course, I had a good understanding of fiat and how broken that system was. That's even before we printed as much as we ended up printing. But I'm like, okay, I was wrong. And so I bought my first crypto. 2020 is probably not the perfect time to do it, but it was good exposure. I experienced immense, insane gains and big soul crushing losses. And the great thing about that is it kind of numbed me to volatility. So like when Palantir does crazy stuff or SoFi does crazy stuff, it's like, it's not like crypto. So it's fine. It's, 15% drop in one day for SoFi. No big deal. Like I've seen that before. So that was the one good thing about it. Of course, I'm stuck with what I've got. So Tevis, what about you? What was your aha moment?
I bought it initially as just a way to diversify a small amount. And I got in fairly early-ish. I bought in for the first time, I think like early 2018. and then I just didn't add anymore. I think I bought Bitcoin at like 8K or something. And then I just didn't add anymore. And then in 2019, like a year later, I just started adding a little bit more. And at that point in 2019 is when I started like getting orange pilled on the Sailor videos and all of this stuff. And then I was like, what is money? What is the global financial system? So initially it started out as like just a ticker, essentially. Or like, oh, this is something that's interesting. Let me just put a couple of $1,000s in here. And then only after that, actually realize the potential of this thing. And we had the first sort of run up in 2020, 2021, and I was up substantially, and I just didn't want to sell, and I actually bought more.
Yeah.
And then the cool down period where we had the sort of 2022, we had that hangover. That's when I started DCAing and I started buying heavily. And over the summer, it was like the only thing that I was buying basically. So yeah, now it's my third largest position. It's like almost 20% of my portfolio, just Bitcoin. I think crypto total is like 25 to 30, and I'm just holding.
Awesome. Hold it for at least a year. Soak it up. These are the times. The thing that worries me the most right now is like, especially with everything being set up, and I'd be happy to go into a rant for why we're set up so well for this cycle, stuff that I didn't talk about in Tanner's, but I did the last video I did with him. But the thing that I see people being super guilty of, and I think that's going to happen a lot right now, is they're going to sell out early. I just had a post from somebody today. They're like, hey, Cypher mining's up like 25%. I sold it all. I'm going to buy it when it drops. And it's like, I get that that's a big number for the day, but this thing could double or triple in months. So 25% might seem like a lot, but I just feel like a lot of people are going to sell early. You got to sell near the top. Tevis probably would have liked to have done that in 2021, but yeah, right. Your first cycle, I feel like it's a gimme. Like you're going to lose a ton of money, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah,
I didn't even know, like in 2017, I didn't know there was a halving. I didn't know what that was. I was so focused on Ethereum, I didn't know anything about Bitcoin, and so I didn't even know that it was cyclical. And so I was just doomed.
I didn't know there was a halving. I didn't like. I sort of knew these things sort of tangentially, but I had never read up on them. The funniest part was this thing goes up, and I think my average at that time was like 12K, and this thing goes up to 40, 50, 60, and then I'm like getting everybody that I'm like, guys, this is the thing, and I'm pretty sure. So at that time, my parents, they've always been in real estate their whole life, and they were like, okay, like we'll put like 10K aside, and that's it. And so I bought them. I think I bought them like 5K in Bitcoin and 5K ETH or something like that. And the poor bastards, at that time, it was like 60K. And so they've just been at a loss for the last 2 years. And I'm like, Mom, you're finally in the green again. She's like, oh, wait, I forgot I had that, like, it's been like 2 years now.
There's a curse too, where like you get really excited your first time and you tell everybody about it. Everybody gets into it. And then they all lose tons of money because you don't know what you're doing and you got them in it. And then they don't listen to you for investment advice for like at least a couple years until you start making money again. So there's a real danger there for how many people you pull in when you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I really try never to talk about fun. Like that's kind of why I have YouTube as like an outlet for me to just, talk about all my ideas, because I'm done talking to family or anything like this, because sometimes they'll ask me like, hey, what are you buying? And then I was dumb enough back in the day to tell them. And then I will watch the fluctuations of the companies sell out at a certain point. And then if that ends up turning sour, they're like, hey, when's this turning around? Why are you holding this? I'm like, I'm not holding that.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Time ago.
I've had that happen too. Yeah, that's the worst.
For my
You're smart, man.
For my dad, like sometimes we would have like I would go for dinner on Sundays and stuff, and we'd have conversations and we would talk about all of global events, politics, whatever. And he'd be like, so what is this Bitcoin thing? Because I see it in the news, and like by the time it sort of gets disseminated to like the average person that's not on FinTwit and that's not just like in the news, like that's the point where you're like, oh yeah, like that's the price discovery piece, which I mean we're going to talk about this time around, but it becomes a topic of conversation where so many more people start learning about it because this thing has already gone parabolic.
Yeah. There's this saying that every cycle, people are like, not so much this cycle, but usually every cycle, people are like, but isn't it priced in, the halving? And it's like, no, it's not. It never is. You know why? Because the majority of people don't know anything about this. And they learn. And the network, you can see the network address growth. Is that the right? You see the network address growth and its consistency, the angle that it goes up. And then you know that you have the halving event where you're like, we're going to go from 900 Bitcoin getting created a day down to 450 here soon in like 42 days, 41 maybe now. And it's just like you don't realize. I don't even know where I was going with that. I already lost my train of thought. I apologize, guys. It's been a long day. This is my third video or fourth video. I can't even keep track.
So maybe, Jesse, we can actually dive into setting some of the groundwork of what we're going to talk about, because, you know, we are now getting started. And I know that we just hit the all-time high. I'm still using the term getting started into what is my second sort of bull run.
Sure.
And this is really unique. And the reason why, and I've been talking about this a little bit on my channel, you know, more recently over the past 6 months, the reason why is institutions. And that really changes the playing field with regards to Bitcoin, because, you know, back 5 years ago, and especially even prior to that, it was something that somebody with a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 just played around with. It was very speculative. Here in Canada, I mean, they're more, how can I say, they're a little bit more conservative on the banking side. They didn't even let you, you know, play around with this. Like the bank would halt your transaction to any crypto broker because they were like, no, this is dangerous. You're an idiot. You're going to lose all your money. Trust us. And so we had to like go through hoops to even get our money to the broker in the first place. And now it seems as though that paradigm has completely shifted. It's become like the taboo aspect has gone away, and everybody knows about it, and everybody sort of acknowledges it at a high level. Even people who, you know, are not in that world specifically, they might not exactly understand the halving and the 21 million supply and all of the intricacies, but they know that, oh yeah, it's digital gold or digital money. They have these like little phrases that they group Bitcoin under. And so it feels different.
Yeah, it's way different now. Institutional is just huge. I mean, the CFTC in the United States kind of started some of that a while ago. They started basically getting it to where banks were going to be able to start to incorporate this stuff and maybe start to have custodying. They were way ahead of the SEC back in the day, at least here in the States. I think, though, didn't you guys have like an ETN or an ETF before us?
Yeah.
For like Bitcoin and stuff like that? Didn't
BTCC.
you guys? A what?
The ticker symbol was BTCC.
Was it an ETN or an ETF or what was it?
I think it was just an ETF. It was a Canadian ETF.
Yeah. So you guys are definitely conservative on the banking side, but you guys were actually even ahead of us. The SEC really fought that. I thought Gary Gensler, I was kind of pissed. I thought Gary Gensler was going to be this huge advocate for Bitcoin because I don't remember if it was MIT or where he taught, but he was a professor and he talked about Bitcoin and he had these very positive speeches and diatribes about them in his lectures. And then he became the head of the SEC and he just turned into a total dick. And I don't know if he knew that just because of the power of Bitcoin and what it was able to do, but he obviously feared it and completely changed his rhetoric and fought it tooth and nail, because I don't think he wanted government bonds to be powerful. He wanted people to look at the US dollar and buy bonds. He didn't want the store of value to be Bitcoin. And the problem is all the politicians in Washington have been turning on him. And again, the courts turned on him. And then he lost all of it. And now we have our ETFs, and now Brazil has an ETF that's kicking in for BlackRock, and South Korea is getting ready to do one. And they met with Gary Gensler a couple of weeks ago, and Hong Kong's looking at doing a bunch of them. So like the inflows now institutionally from around the world are insane.
Yeah.
Just the pipe is so much bigger. And then there's these FASB accounting rules in the state where before they were intangible assets on your balance sheet. So like companies like MicroStrategy would have to write it down to the lowest price of the quarter, which sucked. I mean, you got an asset that could drop 30 to 40% in a quarter, and you got to write it down to whatever the lowest price was. Nobody's going to hold that on their balance sheet, except unless they're insane like Michael. But now that's not true. And so now the Bitcoin miners are doing better from their financials. And now people like Michael Saylor are starting to benefit from his perpetual money printer, because the dude just buys more Bitcoin. then his company literally becomes more valuable because he owns more Bitcoin today than he owned yesterday. And then the stock goes up a bunch. He waits for it to get to a stupid level, and then he sells more shares, and then he buys more Bitcoin, and then his company the next day is worth more than it was. And it's like this man has figured out how to just continually grow his company off of Bitcoin. I can't even imagine what MicroStrategy is going to look like at the peak of the next cycle. Could be one of the biggest companies in the world. So it's going to be crazy.
A lot of things there. I think.
Yeah. Sorry.
Just starting at the beginning, I think, with regards to the politicians and the institutions.
Sure.
I remember so many politicians were against this. And then you had El Salvador was like the first one that was publicly just, their president was like, hey, we're going to buy 1 Bitcoin every day. And just tweeting about it, and everybody saw the economic progress that one country made with regards to just overall throughout this entire period. It was almost like a case study for the rest of the world to get in. And so I'm curious to get everybody's thoughts is like, what was the thing that changed the tune, right? Because you had everybody, like Mark Cuban was like, oh, it's going to zero. Jamie Dimon was like, oh, it's nothing. And then all of these people are now coming out and they're like, oh yeah, we're bullish, we're buying, whatever. Like, was it just the fact that this was an inevitable shift and there was this game theory undertone where if they didn't do it, somebody else would do it, and as a result, they would be left behind? Or what was the thing that shifted that sentiment across the board? Because it seems as though from politicians to investors to institutions all across the board now, I mean, Gary Gensler became the villain for holding it back so long.
Yeah, it's taxes.
You guys go first. I'll rant for a while. So
it's absolutely taxes. That when the government can tax something, they're very happy that it continues and exists. So once they flip that switch and they began to take taxes on it like any other equity, then they're like, okay, this is more revenue for our government and we're going to spend more than we make anyway. So yay, Bitcoin, let's go. And Gensler, I think when he went in, initially, it was the opposite. It wasn't regulated, taxed, anything. He was pro Bitcoin, and I think it was the political pressure and then the foreseen danger to us as a reserve currency. So, but I think reality is maybe Bitcoin replaces that eventually, but that's a long way off. We're not anywhere near there, even if it happens. But yeah, ultimately, it's taxes. If they can make money on it, the government's happy with it.
Can I push back on that for just a second, Roy? Because whatever. So initially, the reason why governments were against this was because you're taking money out of the system. If I put $10,000 into Bitcoin, that's $10,000 of buying power, essentially, that the system doesn't get. I don't stimulate the local economy. I don't put this into banks. I don't, pump up stocks or whatever. I'm taking this completely out of this game and I'm putting it somewhere else entirely. I'm taking it out of Canada, that productivity, let's say, that resulted in that $10,000, and I'm putting it aside. That's obviously bad because you need that lubricant in terms of the economy to move forward. That loss that they would have across the board with everybody putting their money into Bitcoin would be much less than the gain that they would have by taxing Bitcoin, especially with long-term holders, right?
Yeah, I don't see it that way. Bitcoin's a little bit unique where people actually buy and hold it for a long time or forever. But for the most part, if you look at the volatility of this, like that's one of the reasons why Robinhood's doing so well, is that crypto people are buying in and out. They're trading it like crazy. Even if they're not traders, they're just like, they buy Dogecoin at 12 and it pumps to 20 and they're like, I'm out. So the velocity of money is really something that does appeal to them. And usually when people sell, it's back not into a stable coin because people don't know about that. They just sell into the US dollar. So they create a tax event. So they're cycling that money back and forth. It's not just staying there as unproductive assets.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not like Gary Gensler didn't have a good shot at trying to shut it down. I just think that courts didn't side in his favor. That's why there's a change of tone, is because, lawmakers looked at this and said, well, it's potentially a commodity and that it's allowed to be here. And regardless of what this is doing to potentially the US dollar, it's set in law that it's not necessarily breaking any rules. And so the people who choose to buy Bitcoin for those reasons of getting out of the US dollar, or out of that cycle, is not necessarily up to the lawmakers to decide. Now, I'm surprised by their ruling, but that's what happened. That's amazing for people, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Now, my question, however, is, one of the things that people talk about is, regardless of if governments shut down Bitcoin, the network can still go on potentially without regulation, right? If you have someone else's wallet address and you have yours, that you guys can transact without letting anyone else know. Do you guys think that that can actually go on still? Or do you think that most, if not, well, not all, but essentially a high majority of people's wallets are actually pegged to their individual names, and that there are systems that are tracking?
Oh, yeah. I can answer this one. So real quick, though, I wanted to go back. So taxes, taking money out of the system, courts making the decision. So I agree. I think the fears are like kind of everything that you guys just said. There is a fear about losing tax dollars. I mean, I listen to endless politicians talk about it. There is the taking the money out of the system. I watch these boring senators talk almost daily, and I listen to them complain for years about these things, completely uneducated, don't know how anything works. Oh, it's a den for drug use and blah, 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 and money laundering and all this other stuff. And it's like, no, that's the dollar actually. But they all these things were fears, right? And I do think that there was, I think that the courts, you're right, Tanner. I think that the courts made the decision that pushed it through. But I also think that the political pressure in Washington boiled over every major candidate, even Trump. Trump for a long time didn't like Bitcoin. He's like, I like the dollar or whatever, however Trump talks. And he didn't want Bitcoin to thrive at all. But that's changed. And now he's for it. He's for it because there's Democrats that are for it. There's Republicans that are for it. And having everybody realizing that it's popular with the people has become huge. And so I mean, you're probably not getting elected, I would think, in the next 4 years if you have an anti-Bitcoin, status. You've got to be supportive of it or not talk about it. And so I think there's a lot of things that changed dramatically on that front. And then I can't remember what you were saying at the end, Tanner. What was it?
Oh, I was just talking about, do you think that Bitcoin could ever go on if, let's say, it did get outlawed? Because, for example, the Canadian government actually had a situation where there was a protest that the government didn't like, and that they ended up freezing people's assets and freezing the exchanges, so then people couldn't get their crypto off the platforms.
Sure. They're going to have that control, right? Like they do the KYC and AML. So know your customer and anti-money laundering. I don't know what your version is in Canada.
It's identical.
What?
It's identical. It's a...
Is it the same thing? Okay. I didn't know if that's like an international standard or what. It probably is, right? For money.
Same regulator that regulates both of us.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing that they've been trying to button down over the years, right? They wanted, so a lot of people that don't even realize this about Bitcoin, it's pseudo-anonymous. And so like there's chain analytic tools that track everybody. And so if they don't know you, they know everybody around you, and then they can ascertain who you are. And then with KYC AML, it makes it really difficult. So like you don't use Bitcoin to move money undetected. Now, the great thing about it is you can still move money. If you're trading directly in Bitcoin, it can go around the world and you can skip the financial system, but they might still know who you are. So if you're using it for tax evasion, you're probably screwed. But I think that, I mean, look at China. They banned Bitcoin and mining years ago. And they're like, I think third for hash rate right now, maybe fourth in the world. They've actually banned it like 4 times. And they still use it. And it's probably still one of the best ways to launder money and get it out of the country right now. So I don't think it goes away no matter what. I do think, though, that you want, with any adoption cycle, you want to turn your enemies into your friends. So you have these stages of progression. First they fight you, all this stuff. And then there's a stage where they want to incorporate with you. They want to incorporate with it before you eventually just consume them and take over, right? Like that's kind of how technology works. And so I think that it's good that major powers, especially democracies around the world, are starting to embrace it. And it makes me happy that the US took the stance they did. And years ago, I was so disillusioned with getting an ETF. I almost never thought it would happen. And so it was really great in this last year to realize that that was actually coming to fruition and it was going to occur. But I don't think at this stage, I don't think they can kill it. I don't see how you back out of this right now.
Especially
it just
as
doesn't work the same. It's not like gold confiscation. It doesn't work the same.
Yeah, especially as it pours into people's retirement accounts and, through endowments and state, pension systems, these sorts of things, or retirement systems. This is going to really impact consumers in a negative way if they start to claw back and actually it impacts the price of those assets, and that you could actually be hurting someone's 401k. That was the real problem too, right? Is like, as they were trying to really hamper crypto and they were saying, hey, we're saving the retail investor, a large portion of the crypto holdings were retail investors. You were hurting the retail investor. So yeah, the deeper that the claws are being sunk in, the harder it'll be to change that. But like Jesse said, they did outlaw gold. That they did outlaw gold bullion. That happened for a little bit.
And they confiscated it, but you can't do that in Bitcoin. You could do it if it's on an exchange. You could do it if it's tied to an ETF. But again, it's not a physical commodity. So what are you even doing? It's a really different world. But on a cold storage device, there's the old joke, and maybe this will happen to me someday, but I had a boating accident and I lost it. And so it's like, it's gone. How do you prove any other way? How do you prove differently? If I don't attach that to a fiat system again, you have no way of knowing what happened to it. And with Lightning, you have no way of even knowing what's going on. So if I'm using
the transactions are just pooled, is that what you're saying?
Lightning is like, it does this series of hops and you don't know where it's going to end. And so it's like impossible to track with a Lightning network, but you could do like small purchases with the Lightning network, sitting on a beach somewhere. And you could, then just send a big, like whatever you want to do, you could hide for a long time in the middle of nowhere. So it's a harder system to get away with right now. It's harder to do what they did with gold, where it was very easy to, like, if people had gold and, they purchased gold, you have them turn it in, you make them do it. And I don't know, maybe something like that could happen with Bitcoin in the future. But that's again why I have cold storage too on some of my holdings. But I doubt it, frankly. I doubt it. I think it's just too hard to consume a decentralized system like Bitcoin. I just don't see how any government could do it. And I don't even know I don't see how they could do it. I don't see how they could do it because whatever country doesn't do it, that country will thrive. Their people will thrive and people will move to that country. And the ones that don't embrace it will lose. It's like this organic system. And even like people are like, oh, but what happens if somebody messes with the code and like hacks it? Like, let's say you control 51% of the hash rate for a couple of days, right? So you could alter the Bitcoin network and the transactions going forward, but you'd need even more power to go back into the past and make changes to it. But even if you controlled it for a little bit of time, they could just rewrite the code, the people that care about the network and the value within it. And that if you controlled the hash, that 51% for a period of time, you would have created a forked chain because of the way that the code works. And so you have two chains. Then the people that care about the right network, the one that is for self-preservation and not destroying it, and the people get to decide this with which one they use, right? And the miners get to decide this with which one they use. Then that would be the chain going forward again. So somebody could theoretically take over the chain and then lose it, and it could be rewritten to go down a different path, and the people could pick the path that's not malicious. So it's like self-preservation in every possible way. It's just this beautiful science. And the most important thing, I think, like, sorry to go deep in the woods, but I like the Keynesian economic view of money velocity. You mentioned that a second ago, Roy. I do think that there's a place for money velocity. You want to have money velocity because if money exchanges hands, it can go from a business to a person, to another business, and it can enrich everybody along the way. That's the whole Keynesian thought, right? Is that through getting money to move, we can create wealth and abundance. And I do think that that can work to a degree. It works when you have a society that's growing. It works when you have a population that's increasing. It works great in those circumstances. But what happens when you reach a point where everybody's highly educated and they're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to wait until my 30s to have a fucking kid. Or you know what? Let's wait until we're 35. Oh, now we had one and now we're too fucking old. So we can't do this anymore. And then you have a population decline, or you prevent migration. Your country starts to decrease in size. Then this problem gets worse. You don't have the GDP to keep up anymore. You've created all these social experiments to try and take care of everybody that lives in the society. And all countries throughout history do this in some way. They expand, they start spending more, and they just implode upon themselves. And so I think that I don't know where my rant's going again, getting tired, but I think that that's why Bitcoin has to exist in this world, because Keynesian economics is broken. It probably always has been. And I don't think it's the best way for money to exist. I think that there's this book from Jeff Booth. I love this guy. It's called The Price of Tomorrow. It talks about how prices become deflationary and cheaper over time through technology and innovation. But it also talks about how a better world can be created by allowing scarcity and money to exist, by allowing me to keep more of my money and not have it degraded every day in order to create velocity, to increase spending, instead of looking to buy cheap crap that's been advertised for a particular day. We don't do that anymore. Instead, we build for our futures and we build for our children's futures, because money doesn't lose value. It's not going to be worth less tomorrow than it is today. And so we start to think about, what do I want to build? And we start to think about hey, all my needs are taken care of, especially in a day like today, where we're looking at AI becoming more powerful. We're looking at robotics on the cutting edge. We're looking at autonomy in vehicles and everything. And then we're looking at energy. Energy 10 years from now will be abundant. It'll be cheaper than it is now, probably 90% lower than it is now. And so when you have cheap energy in abundance, and then you have money that doesn't get constantly devalued, I actually think we're like at the start of Star Trek, utopia, where and my conservative friends hate this, but where we could have a UBI, a universal basic income, for a while, because I think the government can keep printing money. It's going to die. The currency is going to die. All of them are. It's inevitable. It happens throughout history. Sorry, I'm going on a rant, but give me one more second. I'm getting there. But I think all these currencies will die, and eventually they'll be replaced with Bitcoin, and we'll have at that time so much abundance and energy and wealth that we can live in a better world where people can get a small income for a while this transition is happening, to where we don't see homeless people all over the fucking place. We don't see junkies all over the place. We don't see just people whose lives are destroyed because they don't have basic standards of life, and they've given up, and they can't even go to a job anymore because they can't maintain this basic function in life because they're so tired of all of it. I think you can get rid of just a lot of trash that exists in the world right now, and you can make the world a better place. And that's why I love Bitcoin. That's my entire investment career right now is focused on finding things that make the world a better place. And that's why I'm a massive advocate for it. That's why I go on these long rants. You guys can talk now. Sorry.
I just want to ask a question about, because I think Bitcoin as a store of value is an almost certainty, in my opinion.
Totally.
Bitcoin as a spendable currency, I struggle with, because I find that if there is let's just imagine this hypothetical of all money becomes Bitcoin, and that all the current wealth of today starts pouring in to try to buy 21 million coins. The value of the Bitcoin will continue to increase over time. Who would ever spend that to go buy a candy bar? That's the whole pizza box conversation that people had before. It's like, can you believe this dude bought a pizza for $42 million US?
Yeah.
Well,
So I do agree with that. There's this book, The Bitcoin Standard by Seyfedin Ammous, that talks about some of that. I agree that in the beginning it would be like that, right? Like you're right. You have to have this transition period where you have alternate currencies and they can just disintegrate as they like we're not at hyperinflation yet, but I mean we printed like 40% of the money supply in like 4 years that's ever existed in this entire country's history. We go back a
It's
ways.
just one country.
Yeah, we go back a ways. Like there was
massive,
life
right?
in the United States before 2020, right? So, but with that kind of printing, it's over. Like we're gonna be spending more just servicing the interest on our debt than our military budget, and that is a huge amount of money, and that's only going to get worse every year that goes by. There's two things that can save us: innovation can save us, and Bitcoin can save us. And I think both of those are sitting right in front of us right now. And so if Elon starts building a bunch of robots, they replace the concept of GDP, we're saved. Then the velocity of money can keep going up and it can hyperinflate a little bit. And it doesn't really matter if they can pull a bunch of taxes from corporations that have robot workers and people are making a universal basic income. So that stuff I think can exist for a while. And I agree with you. I think Bitcoin, I think probably its primary purpose is a store of value. And whether or not it turns into an actual currency, I don't know. I really don't know. It could in theory, but there's got to be like some bolt-ons and maybe some other shit coins that attach to it and that they're like cheap.
Inflation to an extent is a good thing. Like,
sure, it can be.
You know, or you get what happened to Japan where their dollar was deflating for so long and their money was worth more than it was the year before. And so no one was spending. You know, it's like the opposite of buying the newest iPhone that comes out because the iPhone that you currently have is better than the one that you're like,
to a degree.
You're in this death spiral, right? You're adding what, $1 trillion of debt now every 100 days. And really that death spiral started with COVID because of that drastic amount of printing. Like inflation is a good thing to a certain degree because it incentivizes spending, which stimulates the economy.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, we might get to that period. I mean, the way I see Bitcoin is in phases. And right now, like a lot of people are buying the underlying asset for one of the reasons in terms of its durability or the lack of printing, let's say, because it's a durable asset. The next phase of that is going to be the infrastructure that's built on top of that in terms of making it a transaction method as well. If the entire world moved towards Bitcoin, the price wouldn't be so volatile. The price would stabilize. There's a fixed supply.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not the problem. The volatility will go away. The larger it gets, it'll go away. I don't have that qualm at all.
Yeah, so it's going to stabilize.
Who spends in increasing value asset to buy things that are consumable?
It's not going to be increasing value though, because it's going to reach a maximum essentially. If it's adopted by,
but the maximum might take 80 years. Like
totally. That's legit.
You know?
Yeah. But I will say this: I don't think it's a direct comparison to Japan because there's a lot of problems that existed in Japan. It didn't help that they had their Chinese brethren right across the pond from them, taking all of their business, stealing their chip sector, stealing their TV sector. You got to realize, like, what happened in Japan wasn't just a slowing down in money velocity. We literally started sending all of our work to China for cheap labor. And they started copying and doing espionage and taking everything from Japan. It used to be Sony and all these other guys. Japan was the place you went to for technology. And then it turned into China. So China destroyed them. So I'll make an argument that I don't think all of that is just like, oh, they didn't have enough velocity of money and people weren't spending because of that. It's just they didn't have money because they lost it all. And Bitcoin too is an international asset. And what I think happens is I think currencies start to die off around the world and they switch to having a solid store of value backing them, like Argentina's talking about it doing it right now. And you said earlier that El Salvador was doing that, making it a currency, getting behind it and with their government. And I think that you see more and more of this happening. And then you see that the countries that are doing this and embracing it, you'll see the riches and benefits that will come to them. And you'll have more and more countries do the same. And I do believe though, like, deflation is a very real thing that is going to be happening en masse around the world right now for a number of reasons, whether it's global populations collapsing and all of the older countries that have become technological savvy and that are first world. I mean, they get to the point where they don't have kids anymore. So we're going to see like deflation coming from, like, that's another problem with Japan. They don't have people anymore, right? They got a bunch of empty houses. You can buy one for like $100 out in the countryside. They just don't, they have all these empty places. That's going to happen. That's already happening in mass in China. That's going to be happening here. That's happening all across Europe. So you have deflation coming from that, but then you have technological deflation too. And so like people talking about worries of inflation, I'm just sitting there like, that is not our problem in the future at all. We're already going to be embracing deflation in a major way. That's why I think that some of the money printing is probably going to be okay for a while, because they'll need to print money to be able to get it to where velocity is stable, just to where it's stable. Because with all the deflation coming in, you're right, we could see across this country and Canada and all these other parts of the world, we're seeing it in China pretty bad right now. We're seeing people not wanting to spend money and trying to preserve wealth. And I think we're going to see that happening with Bitcoin and other things too in this country. And they're going to money print to try and increase velocity to get people to spend. But then you're going to have technology dragging all this stuff down. It's going to be really fascinating to see what happens over the next 5 to 10 years across all the different economies of the world. And you said something before about like blood and violence or something. Like, I don't know, man, there's a lot of interesting things that are happening right now. A lot of conflict. I don't know if you guys read like The Fourth Turning or any of that stuff, but like, there's just a lot of interesting things that could happen and that historically do happen around times like right now.
So my thought on that, I don't think Bitcoin will be that future currency for the world. I think that
why
the idea of it being digital gold works really well. It's going to be less inflationary than gold after this next halving. But
I would rather have PayPal USD.
Yeah. Right. But no, like seriously, gold, if you think about the way it's been used historically, that isn't really used to buy things, except if you're a government, if you're a king, or if you're fabulously rich. You couldn't use it with just a few rare exceptions and time periods in history. And
why is that though, Roy? Real quick, I'm going to call you out. Why is that? Why don't people use gold to buy things?
Well, it's scarce. Scarce for one. It's hard to break down into small individual bits.
That's exactly it.
And so,
that's my point.
Like I was back in like 2007, 2008, very much into like prepping and certain things. And, there's an element of that. I'm still like, it's good to be more self-sufficient, but that was the thing, is people were storing up gold and silver in that time. And the problem with gold is like, okay, the world falls apart. And let's say gold even still has worth at that point. Maybe it does. How do you use it? Like, you're not going to use it to go down to the store and buy stuff. You just can't. And so Bitcoin, I think, is like that. It can be broken down into smaller bits, but I think it's
million Satoshis per Bitcoin.
Yes.
So it's pretty divisible.
Oh yeah. It's up to a certain point. There's past a point where it can't, but as far as the way it's programmed and everything, it's not really designed for a spending currency. And so I think that there will be something else that will be the silver, or if we're in really bad shape, maybe the fiat currencies or the coppers. It just depended on like the era in history that you're at, but typically it was gold or something like gold for the incredibly rich, or the governments, and then you use silver for your everyday thing. And if you were in a time where they were just inflating like mad, there'd be just copper or nickel or something like that. So
I could totally see that. The Romans were very guilty of stuff like that too. Yeah, no, I agree with you on that point. I just wanted to make the point that like the divisibility portion, like the big hurdle with gold is not the hurdle with Bitcoin. But I do think that eventually, as the network progresses too, fees on the base layer will be expensive. And so I do agree, like it wouldn't be a great thing for like your average daily settlement. Even the Lightning Network is great right now. There's still bugs with it, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
As far as technology, there's so many superior cryptos that could be used as that medium of exchange, but there's no silver system out there yet. But I think that Bitcoin has cemented itself as that digital gold. I can't see a scenario barring like a massive solar flare that knocks out everything, the zombie apocalypse, something like that, where I think Bitcoin's here to stay.
I do think it's a logistical problem though that's powered by technology because you know if you really think about it, if Apple were to adopt this thing where like they have Apple Pay, if they were to say, okay, well, we're actually going to make it super easy and accessible for you to transact in Bitcoin, then everybody has like a phone in their household. And so it's not like, I think it's a technological problem that can get solved over time to make it more accessible and make it more divisible because of the fact that it's intangible. It's not a physical thing that you have to actually consider all the, the portability of it. But I think that the more that the governments print or the rate at which they print is going to be correlated to the rate at which the middle class is deteriorating. And fundamentally, the reason why I really liked Bitcoin was because it was something that the market decided on, right? Money historically has been something that the government essentially decided on. If we had aliens come to look at civilization and there was no remnants of humans, they would look at 1971 and they would say, what the fuck happened here? Because all the charts just go haywire after that point.
Oh yeah,
and
we're going off the gold standard. Yeah.
Right. And so before that, everything was pegged to gold. And as a result, it had some stability over time. But still, the reason why they went off the gold standard was because they wanted to print, was because, of them, it being unbearable, essentially unsustainable to fund their wars, to fund whatever.
Exactly.
And so,
yeah, they wanted to spend more.
Exactly.
Got to spend more.
Exactly. Yep. And that is a death spiral. Like that is a vicious cycle that, yep. I mean, if you guys ever read Thomas Piketty, he explains this really, really well. But fundamentally speaking, if we go back to the ETFs, everybody can see what's happening in terms of the deterioration of the purchasing power of the dollar. And the people who have the money, who have that power currently, they're not going to be standing around as they see their money being deteriorated. They're going to put it into assets that appreciate. And now that they're going to have exposure to Bitcoin in their retirement funds, that's a way to preserve that wealth. And so ultimately, what's going to end up happening over the next 5 to 10 years, the first thing that you're going to notice is you're going to notice that middle class deteriorating. And as a result of that, the social standards around you deteriorating as well. Like, I mean, it just becomes untenable in terms of an economy like that, because you have a group of people that can't invest or that don't invest, that see their wealth falling every single year. And as a result, they're more tethered to like, oh, I have to work more hours. I got to do more stuff. And then you have a group of people that can invest, that see their assets and wealth increasing over that same time period.
Yeah, it's not good. And then you have issues like we've had over the last 4 years where you see more and more people like myself retiring because they can, because their assets are gaining wealth. So you have smart and maybe sophisticated and maybe leaders and organizations or businesses just quit because they can, because they've made money off the destruction of the currency. And so that causes all kinds of complications too, that are damning to a civilization.
Could I add a couple things in?
Yeah.
I see a large critic in the chat, goes by the name of B-Dubs. B-Dubs is talking about how, how can Bitcoin be used in retirement portfolios or used as currency if this thing is having 90+% drops against US dollars? One, that's also due to just the sheer size of it being so small right now, right? The larger it's gotten, the less, like in the most recent crash, which everyone said was the death of Bitcoin, was actually one of its least dramatic drops, which is funny to whenever compared to what people have gone through in previous cycles. So
it's like 92 to 68 in the time I've been there. That's what the trough was in my first one. And then I don't know if it was 68 or 70 or whatever for this last one. And the next one might be like in the 50s for the drop, because as the scale grows. You're totally right.
And
it's also one of those things where as the institutions get in, they reduce that volatility because they form a base of more long-term holders.
Especially ETFs, especially ETFs. Retirement accounts.
Yeah. Like the funniest thing is that it's smart money that's holding it. And most people, like the critics, like even potentially B-Dubs, might even be holding it today and not even, maybe not today, but soon. in their, retirement accounts. Most, like a large percentage of the money is in mutual funds, and now they're looking to accumulate. So
Totally.
another thing I wanted to say to B-Dubs just really quick is that he was talking about, unlike Bitcoin, gold has a real utility with being placed in electronics.
Okay.
That was
Is that where
as
it
of the
derives its
last,
value? Is that it?
yeah, that was as of the
Okay.
last 100 years. Before that, why did
Yeah.
Rome have it for their cell phones and their
No.
GPUs?
But it was scarce and it was malleable, so that was cool. They could make it into cool little coins.
Well, and because it was intarnishable, right?
Yeah, totally. Yep. Another
But
good point.
so is Bitcoin.
Yep.
Which I think honestly, my belief, and it could be wrong. I'm not trying to place my beliefs on others, but I'll share them. I think that Bitcoin, blockchain is going to absolutely change everything. I do think Ethereum has a part to play. I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. Okay. The cryptocurrency that I hold the most of right now is Solana, because I think that in terms of actual monetary transfer, it's probably the most used in terms of an actual utility.
Nice
But anyway,
multiplier too. Yeah.
You guys just reminded me of that story with aluminum, where in like the 16 to 1700s, aluminum found naturally was such a rare substance to the point where like everybody in the royal court would have like gold, forks and knives and all that, and then the king would have aluminum. And then in the 1800s, they had advancements in chemistry and they learned how to manufacture it artificially, and then it just became like the most everyday thing. Like you have like aluminum tinfoil now, and just it's worthless essentially.
Iron.
That's my Solana.
That they had meteors that would hit, and they would have iron that they could actually smelt. And that's where a lot of those like legends of magic swords and different things came out, was that they would be able to smelt these, and they were much, much harder than the bronze that they had. But they couldn't actually do that naturally. They had to find meteoric iron very specifically. Now you can go out and, everybody has an iron something, or steel, even better. So,
yep, things change over time.
I just wanted to really finish, just really quick.
Yeah, do it.
I think that Bitcoin, in my belief, will absolutely replace gold as a store of value. I think that central banks will start to hold it. That will be much easier to transport and trade than truckloads of gold that have to be buried and defended by guards and all this crap. That's much more expensive than
so many reasons. Yeah,
than Bitcoin. On the spending side, I don't quite see it just yet comparatively to some of the flexibility to other cryptos out there like Ethereum or Solana, but that's my take so far.
Or pay
you
USD.
guys do have to check out Lightning Network. I mean, it works, and you could spend Bitcoin for a fraction of a penny. Like you could spend it, like it's almost not. It's negligible to non-existent.
I'm not anti that point. I just don't know why someone would spend something that's going to be worth more tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that.
Why
would you? You have to be an idiot.
Have you seen this, Tanner? The Bitcoin ETF flows versus gold ETF flows since launch.
Yeah, it's
fairly impressive.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I think that people, whenever looking historically, like at 1 or 2 years of the moves that Bitcoin has made, like you can think that the shifts are potentially small, but I completely agree with Jesse. I have, not that I have absolute certainty, but I could absolutely see Bitcoin going to 200,000 plus in a very short period of time, because this is just how, the trends work in Bitcoin is you allow for a larger and larger class of money to flow in and make it acceptable for that to do so. And it's like clockwork. And it very much reminds me of where we came from. Like I grew up in the internet age, like starting out, there was a ton of fraud and all of these things, like Amazon got bashed and all of these things because certain e-commerce companies just weren't even sending their product. It was absolutely the Wild West. And now they literally say that about crypto markets now. It's the absolute Wild West.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, very comparable.
And now it's like the larger and larger, more serious players are going to be coming in to sort of advance this as a real asset class. And I don't know. I guess I can see it, but I could be wrong.
I think it was Michael
All right.
Saylor or Robert Breedlove or whatever that just said, buying Bitcoin today is like buying real estate in New York City in like the 1800s. Like it's just there's going to be so much that's going to just grow on it, especially as these cycles increase in terms of awareness and so many more people. Like, do you understand that there's going to be entire cohorts of people that know nothing about Bitcoin today, that as a result of this cycle, maybe it goes to 100, maybe it goes higher, of all of the news that's amplified out there, they're going to say, okay, what's this thing? And they're going to find out about it today. Like the price discovery
It'll
aspect
get bigger every cycle. Yep.
amplifies.
That's what happens.
Yeah. Also, Breedlove has like the nicest jawline in crypto. If there's an original Chad, it is that motherfucker. Hey, real quick, can I share a screen real quick?
Yeah, sure.
It's gold. Wanted to show one other one.
Tevis with the attitude. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And I'm sorry if BJ or whatever his name was doesn't like this, but gold is 19% return since 2023, and Bitcoin is like 300%. So I'm sorry, like I get tired of this argument. I don't have time for it.
I'm gonna rename B-dubs in my chat. I'm gonna name him BJ now.
There you go.
Okay, so can we talk a little bit about, because I feel like we spent quite a long chat around this very like esoteric, high level, here's the story behind Bitcoin, going into like from macro to micro. Not a pun on your name.
Promote my channel. Micro to macro, guys. He said it wrong on Twitter and on YouTube. Micro to macro.
The inverse of Jesse.
Like, ring the bell.
I think he genuinely, by the way, forgot your name, B-dubs. I don't think he was.
I was just kidding. I was fucking with you, man. This is my personality. It's what you get.
Yeah. BJ, Bitcoin junkie. There you go. If we go into the actual nitty gritty of what's happening right now, we can talk a little bit about the supply shock. But, one thing I really want to spend some time on is all of these different avenues that you can have exposure to Bitcoin, and maybe talking about like the comparable aspects of those, because I feel as though every subsequent cycle, we just have more avenues that we can expose ourselves to Bitcoin. Whereas like last cycle, for example, it might have been just the miners. And this cycle, it's like the miners and the ETFs and so on and so forth. Next cycle, it's going to be miners and ETFs and whatever else. And it just seems as though, I don't know, this is the question that I had for you, Jesse, around the miners, but maybe I can just pause there and then we can
ask me.
Yeah, go ahead, Tanner. You're up.
I'm going to defer to a conversation that I had with a Bitcoin mining expert. His name was Jesse, Micro to Macro.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding.
Just the other day.
No. Before Jesse takes away, just real quick, like
go ahead.
One thing that I've learned about Bitcoin is that it's extremely predictable over the long term. If you're looking over years, it's very unpredictable over like days, hours, minutes. Like it isn't. So one thing that shocked me, and maybe you can address this, Jesse, is that this is the first time pre-halving that we've set a new all-time high. Usually that happens, 30 to 60 days after the halving. For me, I think it's, that the government is not trying to hold it back, and you have big money coming in because of ETFs. But that's my thoughts there. My one concern is, okay, I had a good idea coming in back, I was looking at when the next cycle would begin, like where we'd be at. We're well ahead of schedule. And so it's like, okay, is this time just going to be so different that we just can't even guess it? Or are we just moving things up a little bit and probably higher because of the big money?
Yeah. So let me share my screen, and then Jesse, you can talk over this around
go ahead.
supply shock. So this is just like BlackRock and then inflows. But maybe Jesse, you can take it away and you can tell us why this leads in supply shock and what's coming next.
Oh man, there's so much. So again, you have all these ETFs all around the world creating a pipeline and an entry that is just way huger than ever existed before. Because before, you're right, like in 2017, with my bank, I had to like not tell them the business I was doing with mining when I was creating it was a crypto related business, or they would have closed my account. So it's just a very different world now where it's just accepted and it's the norm. And then you have these ETFs giving us tens of trillions of dollars of potential inflows. And then you have the FASB accounting rules making it to where corporations have an incentive now to say, hey, you know what? I don't like the money printing. It causes me to lose a bunch of money. So on our balance sheet, we've got tons of cash. We could buy back stock. But you know what? Maybe we just get some Bitcoin too. And then as the money printing continues, you know, it doesn't hurt our balance sheet. So you're going to have corporations that are going to start to think that way and get into it. You just have, and then you've got the halving that's occurring. There's so many things that are making this different than we've ever seen before. I posted, let me see real quick. I'm going to see if I can share something else real quick that has, how do I do this? 1 second. Let me see. I got to figure out. I don't use StreamYard as much. I'm going to do a window here. Window to the wall. Okay, let's go there. All right. So let me see. Is that coming up? All right. It's a little more vertical than I wanted. But so you have, again, the FASB accounting rules. You've got, let me go down here. You've got OTC desks. So we're running out of Bitcoin on the exchanges.
Even more
vertical. The OTC desks. The OTC desks are essentially hey, this is where the big boys go to buy and sell in large quantities, right? This is where the exchanges and the whales meet in order to be able to sell things in a chunk and then create, you know, liquidity. But they're running out. They've been running out for years, ever since the pandemic, right? People are holding this stuff closer to their chest. They didn't like all the bank failures and the Luna and the Voyager and the FTX and the Silvergate Bank and Genesis. And so they're scared of banks, and then all the bank failures, Silicon Valley Bank, maybe soon New York Community Bank. But so they're scared of all these things, right? They're scared of failure from exchanges and keeping their money on places that they don't trust. They're scared of banks because, I mean, we don't have this problem right now in the United States and Canada, but it's a very real problem across huge swaths of the earth right now, where they might be dealing with triple-digit inflation, or at least high amounts of double-digit inflation, because their governments are just spending like crazy to survive. So but you have this constriction too. So you have this massive inflow and pipe for money to funnel in. You have a huge incentive to do it. You have distrust from the banking system, distrust of exchanges and other people holding your money, making it to where there's less supply available. Then the halving kicks in. Miners stop selling Bitcoin because they're like, fuck that. I'm not selling Bitcoin when it's half the revenue it was last month. I'm going to hold it for as long as I can. I'll dilute shares, whatever. I'm not selling anything. And then you have every retail investor stop. You have all the whales that have already stopped. They've been accumulating. And then you have nothing available. And then you have the bank term funding program disappearing here in 5 days. And then you have the reverse repo markets looking to run out in May. This was providing stealth liquidity to the banking system right now. And so you could just see a setup that I never would have imagined years ago forming right now. That, I mean, the BlackRock, the stuff you were showing a second ago with inflows, they're breaking records every day. And that chart that you had a second ago, I don't know if you want to share that again. I think it's beautiful. That shows how quickly the Bitcoin ETFs are coming up. I think this is a new paradigm. And I think that we're looking in a dramatic way, much higher potential this time around. I was thinking the other one. I really love that other one you had a second ago, gold ETFs versus Bitcoin. That was beautiful for the flows. But I think that we're looking at a cycle like I would have never guessed. And my minimum right now is $280,000. And I derive that from here. I'll show you this real quick.
I would be okay with that as a minimum. That's higher than I was thinking 140. And I think that I'm completely wrong now.
That's what I originally thought. But now I think it's more like this. This is a chart I created years ago. I haven't actually updated it in a long time, but it's done great. So you could see each cycle, right? You could see how I called it a mid-cycle halving. There's like this moment where we hit this and then we just kind of grind down for a while until we eventually break out. And it usually happens each cycle. But we're just going to the moon right now. And if you look like this, and I can share this chart with you guys too, but it's on my page under my pinned profile. But this, I look at it from the halving, from the lows to the highs, going forward and backwards based upon time frames. I look at percentage gains and and losses from these peaks and troughs. I look at, from the halving date going back and forward to try and gauge approximately where we might land. And I mean, my numbers are this last cycle, I think we stopped prematurely because of what the Fed had done. I think we were getting ready to have our final leg higher. And I think we would have gotten close to maybe like the 135 range, or maybe like in the hundreds at least. But now I think we're going to make up for that because we have a setup that I never could have dreamed of, where everything's aligning from the macro to across the entire world. I mean, we've got the most number of elections. We've got in countries that are free right now, we have 4 billion people voting for their presidents or whatever this year. And so during times like that, you see liquidity increase. So I talk about global liquidity all the time. I love it. I think it's a great measure to measure your wealth. But I think that we're going to see a cycle where 280 is easy. And I don't know if it goes beyond that, because I actually think that we're going to get to 92 before the halving. And that's only 41 days from now. So I don't know. It's going to be a crazy cycle. It's going to be a lot of money being made. And we'll see how many people get drug into it this time. I think it's going to be a lot. And I think some of you guys were making a point earlier, and I think Tanner was too, that I think we'll see more stability after we go up this time. We'll get crushed, but maybe it's only in like 54% down or something. We were in the 60s last time. Before that, it was like the 70s to 80s, and then it was high 80s to 90s. So we aren't going to drop by as much because we've got long-term holders in here. Yeah, the rainbow chart's a good one too. There's so many good indicators too, from like what Roy was saying, where you can look at them and compare them and start to figure out when you're in overbought long-term cycle conditions. And you can have an idea of like, I should dial back. I've got 3 different indicators that are telling me we're getting rich. Maybe I should look at whatever that next investment is. Maybe I should invest in something like, what is it, Biddy, where it's an inverse to Bitcoin, and you could use it as a hedge and start selling some of your, miners, sell your shit coins, and then maybe start to step into that to where if the price starts to drop, you don't get wrecked. And maybe make some money on the way down too, and use that to invest in Bitcoin or other things. But I think this cycle is going to be epic.
I saw Andre Jick, a YouTuber, make a really great video, actually.
A YouTuber.
I mean, that's what he is, right?
Yeah, dude, there's not a single person he's
okay. Anyways,
multiples of every all of us put together.
Yeah. Okay, a popular YouTuber, fine. He talked about the rainbow chart specifically, and I think it's like one of the more recognizable charts, and how it was like Bitcoin was following this like power law distribution. And you can see here why we're talking about the halving so much, because you can see all of the halvings marked on this chart and exactly what follows in terms of this chart and how close we are to the next halving, which I think is less than 40 days away now, something like that. It's mid-April.
Yeah, it's right. It's like 41 days. But yeah, you could have got out even in this last cycle, instead of waiting for the deep red. If you zoom in there, you could have got out like at that second band and just called it quits. I probably should have. And there were a number of indicators that were saying like, hey, this is getting crazy. But I thought we could go higher, and I didn't realize that we were getting ready to flip. Jerome was kind of a dick back then, and he told us it was transitory, and he lied.
So let me ask this: we all know this cycle, and at some point, it's going to go back to crypto winter, and probably next summer, next fall, maybe a little bit later in 2025. Are you? So I've got miners. I don't have the ETF, and I have the actual currency as well. My personal view is the miners I'm using for trading to make money, make income. And the actual asset, I don't want to sell the Bitcoin. I'm not a whole coiner. So that gives you an idea of where I'm at. I don't have, well, we're not at 70,000 yet, but not that much in Bitcoin alone. Thankfully I'm a whole coiner in ADA, it's yay.
There you go. That means a lot now.
But yeah, and Ethereum's there too. But so are you guys thinking of this as like your actual Bitcoin asset as like a trade that you will sell out of as a swing trade, next year or at a certain point? Or is there a core that you're just planning to hold on and you're like, hey, this is an appreciating asset that I want to hold over like the next decade?
Yeah. I have real quick. I have a stack that I add to every cycle. So yeah, I agree with you. There's the stuff you trade, and then there's the stuff you keep.
Yeah, for me, the stuff I trade is like I have Coinbase and I have CleanSpark now, and that I'm gonna trade absolutely. Probably, a year from now or whatever, get out of it, and then the actual underlying crypto that I have, I'm gonna hold on to that regardless of what happens. The Bitcoin, ETH, and Sol. Tanner.
Yeah, sorry, I got caught off by a couple comments.
Retired Backstreet Boy.
No.
What did he
Same
say?
dude, but if you go up a little bit more, I was just dying at his
I
comments.
gotta get in your comments. Yours are funny. All right.
Well, you block yours, so
That's
okay.
true.
So anyway,
I get rid of all the fun.
I forget
My
what the
bad.
question
Keep
was.
going.
Sorry, I've been getting distracted a little
Are you
bit.
trading or holding, like hodling, basically?
I've been hodling. I'm a hodler. I bought CleanSpark. I'm not going to hold that forever.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm a hodler for everything.
Let me ask you this, Jesse, because
Yeah.
Going back to that earlier point that I was making around there being so many more avenues to get exposure to Bitcoin, there's going to be more trades that are done on top of Bitcoin, right? Like more plays, essentially. I saw, when was it? Like early this week or whatever, when I was buying CleanSpark, the price of Bitcoin was approaching 69,000, and then all of the miners were down. And then Coinbase was kind of flat. And then the next day, Bitcoin had dropped to like 61, and then all the miners were up, and Coinbase was roaring. And so, I mean, that's a very, very small time frame. But I got me thinking, and I wanted to ask you this because you're the expert, is now that there are these options for ETFs that give so many more people the ability to have exposure to Bitcoin, it reduces the amount of people that will buy the miners, essentially, or the people that might buy, I don't know, let's say Coinbase or Robinhood or whatever for exposure to Bitcoin. Because why would I do that when I could just buy the ETF if I don't have the ability to buy the underlying coin, or if I don't want to buy the underlying coin? Like, how do you view that in terms of weakening that correlation?
It won't. So I mean, they're different tools, right? It's like gold with gold miners. Like, so gold miners operate at a multiple of gold, and so you could make more money with like a small gold miner that can mine gold efficiently and that has like bought a good stake, and all of a sudden they have a decent amount of gold coming in. That will operate as a multiple, and you get a much greater return investing in a gold miner. Bitcoin miners are the same thing. They're just a multiplier of the underlying asset. Here recently, they were a multiplier that was anywhere from 3 to 6x what Bitcoin was doing. And a lot of people got interested. Like, I saw you guys talking about buying some of it too. And then I kind of felt bad because I was like, I think I posted a little meme that had like a fire, and it like had Flanders from The Simpsons in it. And I was like, hey, welcome to the club, guys, because I think it dropped literally that day, like 10% or maybe more. But it's one of those things where you have to be ready for that, because it's like a rubber band, right? You got Bitcoin, which is already like moving around a little bit, but then you have these other strands that are really weak, and they move in very dramatic fashion, and they don't always coincide with timing. So like with CleanSpark, when you have something that went up 265% in 6 weeks, and Bitcoin only went up by 50 or 60%, you're going to get these crazy moves. And then the inevitable communication from people where they're like, I don't get it. CleanSpark is down today and the miners are down, but Bitcoin is up. What has happened? This isn't a good play anymore. It's not a good investment. It's like, no, bro, you just got to wait. The rubber band is going down, and the rubber band is going to flip up again. Give it a month or two. Maybe it takes that long, but it's a multiplier. So here's my point. There is more and more money coming into the system right now. There isn't less. There's more than I would have ever anticipated. So all of these tools are going to get used with more abundance and more funding than they were, I think, last cycle. And so I don't see less money flowing into them just because there's other options out there. I think they all still pump up a lot. And it's one of those things where when you have investments too, that's the great thing about the crypto market and Bitcoin, is when they're illiquid and there's no money moving at all, it takes a really small amount of inflows to jack up the price to insane levels. Look at these stupid dog coins or Pepe or whatever the fuck it is. They're great examples where you can make like 1,000% in a week. from some retarded thing that shouldn't exist. But that's the thing that people latch onto each cycle, right?
Like, I laughed so hard at this.
Dog
with a hat is now 3x larger than the Spirit Airlines, guys.
Isn't that great? That lets you know how valuable these really are, right? Because it's got and all those people did, all it is a cash grab. It's bullshit. All of them are. They're just there to get money. Doge was meant to be satire towards Bitcoin, mocking it. One of the guys who created it didn't make a fucking dime off of it, but could have been a billionaire if he would have held his Doge. That guy, I don't even see him on YouTube anymore. But he mocked it for a long time, and then people made tens of billions of dollars off of the thing that he had helped create. And so, yeah, he doesn't touch it anymore. But they're garbage. But my whole point is, when things are incredibly illiquid and you have money flow into them, they operate at a multiplier that is sick. And I think Bitcoin can get 30 to 100x for a multiplier. And what I mean by that is people think, oh, how is Bitcoin going to go up another trillion in its market cap? It doesn't take $1 trillion to make that happen. When there's nobody selling and everybody is buying and the inflows are huge, it could happen with 200 billion. It could happen with 100 billion. It could happen with less. Mm-hmm. And this is a concept that I don't think most investors understand in any market, but it's easier to understand in the crypto world, because if you buy this trash at the bottom in the bear market and it's newer or whatever, you get the right things, you kind of pay attention to what people are talking about on the socials. You look at transaction data, you do what James from Invest Answers does, how he made so much money off of Solana, but you find this liquid crap. And then when money flows in, it takes a small amount to make these things worth a fortune. So you're right. It looks like it's worth Spirit Airlines, but I'll tell you what, it's not. It's not remotely worth that. And when the market deflates, WIF coin or whatever the fuck we were talking about will go down significantly.
Maybe you can talk about this because I think you just touched on it.
Yeah.
It's this essentially this flow where Bitcoin is the top funnel that captures all of this money from fiat through this awareness cycle. And then they sort of fall into the rabbit holes that it leads to.
Yeah, that's totally true. And it usually works this way. Like this cycle was a little different. Usually the last couple of cycles, it's Ethereum that pumps the markets. But this time around, it was Solana, because like that's the new Ethereum. That was the narrative. And now Ethereum's going to get its opportunity to explode, because you got EIP 4844, where they're reducing the fees by 10x. And then you have the ETF narrative in the next like 4 to 6 months. And then you have the fact that it's deflationary, which, I mean, Bitcoin's inflating, right? This will actually be going down by like, I don't know, 0.3, 0.5% a year, and seeing a reduction in supply. So I think ETH will have a really big narrative in the future. But they do this, right? Like it starts, there's the conservative people invest in Bitcoin. The less conservative people invest in Ethereum and maybe Solana and some large cap miners. And then there's just the fucking degens, like the retarded ones in the meme, that just buy whatever. And then like I'm a Bitcoin millionaire, like that one guy that he appeared on Andre and like Meet Kevin and all those things.
The Dogecoin millionaire.
I feel bad for him. They
He's
tried
a
to tell him
again.
Huh?
He's a millionaire again.
Oh, did he? I suppose he's back, right? Did he not?
With Doge at 20, yeah.
Let's see how stupid he is this time. Let's see if he actually sells.
Oh, if he didn't sell the first time around, he's not going to sell this time.
That's the thing is with Bitcoin, you know, I can hold that forever comfortably. Ethereum, I think it's here to stay. Cardano, I like that one too. Those are just my three. And I've got a little bit in a speculative one that I mentioned. I won't even mention here, but it's such a small amount. Like it's like literally under hundreds of dollars. So, or it's 100, you know, so it's like, you know, if I lose that, it's no big deal. It's like going to the casino, but you got to know if you're into that, like what it is. Yeah. That's not a diamond hand and buy the dip and hold forever. That's you get money, you hit your strike, you like get out.
Yeah. Well, and especially if you go from flipping burgers to $3 million fucking dollars, like, I don't know, maybe take a little bit off the table. Yeah. The dude's insane. If he doesn't do that again this time, he's just borderline stupid. But I don't hold any shit coins. And I'm sorry if I'm demonetized. You know what? Hey, guys, I cuss all the time and I still get monetized. So I think you're going to be fine.
Nobody fucking cares.
Okay. But I don't hold any altcoins at the end of the cycle. I will dump all that trash quicker than anything. I don't like any of them. I'm not married to any of it. I'm married to Bitcoin because I can see the purpose behind it. And I can see that it is the desired store of value for the world right now. And I don't think that's going to change. But the rest of it, I could give a shit. Clean Spark, don't hold miners during the bear market. You will be destroyed. That it is such an ill concept. Miners are barely justifiable in a bull market. I know I used to be one, right? They're completely unjustifiable in a bear market. They're diluting like crazy. It's a financial person's nightmare to look at what happens to those companies every 4 years.
It's
So
usually not well run.
don't hold any of it.
There's
That's why I
exceptions,
do it.
but let me ask.
Yeah.
We're talking about alternative vehicles to invest. There are stocks that are associated with the name, and I wanted to ask on this. So obviously, Robinhood. I'm in that. I think you're in that too, Jesse.
Yep.
That one has been more closely correlated with Bitcoin since November than the actual miners, which is, it's doing well for me just partly because of that reason. Fundamentally, there's some good things. That one, it's a trade for me. Of course, I'm not in Block, but Block is, of course, associated with Bitcoin and doing well. There's others as well. Let me ask what you think of, and give us maybe a story that you can share on this too. PayPal as one of these derivative plays or a stealth crypto play. What do you think about that?
I agree with Tom Lee. He reposted something from me about that exact thing, and I'm like, fuck, I love Tom. He's such a cool shit.
Tom agrees with you.
Can we see that?
Huh? Yeah. And I think I'm right. Should I just say it that way? I think I'm right. I think that PayPal is a stealth play. The thing I love about PayPal is just utterly abused. It has no guidance for the year. It's like if they just don't shit the bed, the price is probably going to go up. And if Ace decides to remotely, which he has not done yet, embrace PYUSD, and the fact that so many people don't even know you could buy Bitcoin and Ethereum on PayPal. I don't get it.
And Venmo.
But but I don't understand why they don't embrace that more, because I think it would be and maybe they just want to put $10.5 billion into stock buybacks beforehand. And they're okay with suffering through the first quarter. That could be the game plan. I don't know. Like, you probably want to buy back the stock on the cheap, right? And then maybe you start showing people through your financials and then sinking into that narrative about, this being a stealth crypto play. Maybe that's what happens. Maybe that's a Q2 move or a Q3 move. I don't know. But I do think that's going to happen.
Even onboards onto crypto exchanges. You see PayPal coming out with so many deepened relationships with Coinbase, and even with like Ledger and MetaMask and Kraken, and
I think they did Arbitrum or something too. I think it was them. It might have been Hood. I don't know, but
I think that was Robinhood.
Yeah, maybe that's Robinhood. But they're doing a lot. They're definitely putting effort into it. I think it'll be a good narrative. We just narratives take time to stew. You got to boil the pot, and then eventually they take off, and then everybody agrees with them. Just like last year, again, I made so much money in 2023, and it was because I bought Tesla when everybody thought it was shit. I bought Meta when people are like, Zuckerberg's such an idiot. And it's like, maybe Zuckerberg isn't an idiot, because he just fired like a third of his staff and then embraced massive profits. So, but and then Palantir took off too. Nobody liked Palantir. It was garbage. Now the Palantir guys are like fucking nuts. Half of them, a third, maybe a quarter. I don't know. You guys are cool, but it's like things change, right? Like, things change and narratives change, and people become zealots for things that they hated. It's narratives are weird, and I think that PayPal will take off, and I think that'll be a big part of it in the future.
It happened with Block,
And
I think you were one of the few people I followed that actually stuck through with Block through a hard time while everyone was kicking it while it was down in the 30s. Like, it was so easy to pick on them whenever people thought that they were just getting diluted and expenses weren't going to change and nothing was going to change. And now you're seeing what they're guiding for 2024, and sentiment just completely turns around.
And I made, in between Block and Hood, these are my shittiest trades as far as like what's happened in the last year and a half, but I made 250 to 300% off my options in both of those. And I'm almost completely out of Block now, so that's locked in. In Hood, I'm down, like I've got like half of it left, maybe 40%. So again, you can make, and it didn't take much, right? Like, is Square up that much? Is Hood up that much? No, but you can make a ton of money when the narrative flips. And so I think I think so many people get caught up in what the narrative is of today that they don't bother to have any foresight or vision into what's coming. And
Well,
that's like the stupidest thing you can do.
The
Is BJ
narrative.
talking shit? Is that why you guys are smiling? What's happening?
No, they're both talking shit about me in the chat. They're not saying anything. They're just saying, why did we invite him on to talk about block?
I mean, like you make the gains, great, but yeah, these tangential plays, it's just like congratulations on the money that you made and everything, but it's the narrative is there also for crypto. Like I remember back in 2022, so many people were saying crypto is dead, all crypto is a scam, Bitcoin's a scam, it's over, all these things.
Yeah,
there's a lot of scams in crypto. Don't get me wrong, but it's like it's not over. And I didn't add as heavily as I should have back in 2022, but I added. I thought it was going to go lower, but every cycle is a little bit more stable. It's still wildly volatile.
Let me push back on this though, because the narrative for Bitcoin is not necessarily that it's going to zero or that it's like this hidden, gem, or that it's bearish. Like the narrative for Bitcoin is euphoria right now. And then what we're saying is we haven't even started yet. And so is there a discrepancy there that we're missing? Like, are we too bullish too early or what?
No.
Deal?
I go to Google Trends to look this stuff up, man. Have you guys looked at that in a while?
No.
Let me see here real quick. Let me share my screen.
I gotta get going though soon, guys. I didn't know that this show ran so freaking late.
Oh my gosh.
Dude, yeah, you guys are crazy, man.
Well,
all right.
Go ahead.
Let me see here. I'm gonna go past days, not helpful. Let's go back a few years. So if you look at the level of interest that exists right now in Bitcoin, it's barely existent compared to what. So these are the peaks that we saw before, but I will argue that this second one would have been higher if the Fed wouldn't have neutered things. If I go back to the beginnings here, you could see the previous cycle. So the trend is as you get much higher volumes, this gets bigger and bigger. And so you could see the 2013 bull and how tiny that is, or going back even further. And then you can see how big 2017 was. The last cycle got destroyed because the economic and macro environment sucked. But this time around, we're low in comparison. Getting up to here is going to be easy. I think we'll easily surpass it because of all the inflows and the things that are available to us right now to draw money in. I got to get in this chat. I feel like I missed the good stuff. So I think that I think we're super early. And how many retail people, like I'm just now starting to have people ask me about Bitcoin. And historically, like I would have much, much, much higher volumes of people hitting me up, especially near the top. It's insane. Like people I didn't even know I knew from school will call me up and be like, Jesse, we hung out one time in a playground and like kindergarten. Can you tell me about this? And so it'll be right at the top, and I'll be like, fuck, I gotta sell.
This is really cool. Like, I'm glad you showed this because if you look at just the price action, it tells one story where, we broke all-time highs. And the underlying assumption is that the euphoria is also the same as it was in 2021. And this shows you like it's more correlated to that rainbow chart that we showed of the cycles, and shows that, we're actually nowhere close to the level of awareness in search volume for Bitcoin as we were back then.
No, and it should grow each cycle. You could see this one, we might not have gotten the peaks, but you can see how there's some width in it. So like the interest was still higher for longer, right? That's what she said. But right here, we've barely gotten started. We haven't had a parabolic move at all.
So if somebody's brand new to this, let's say they've heard of Bitcoin, but they're one of these guys where it's not quite, euphoria yet like it was. Because I remember back in those days, like I had a guy that I worked with that every week he'd ask, should I buy, or Bitcoin's interesting. And then the next week, like, should I buy Bitcoin? And thinking about buying Bitcoin. And finally, when he bought it, I think it was like right at the top. We had like random people mentioning that their husband bought Dogecoin, and we're not there yet. But let's say that there's someone who's followed Bitcoin, a couple of years. They put in some DD. They understand. They just want to. They're focused on Bitcoin. They just want to buy and hold it. Let's say they got $10,000. What if you were that person? So you put in the time. You want to buy and hold Bitcoin. Like, how would you approach that? Would you buy the coin
tomorrow?
Would you like dollar cost average in? Would you
do it tomorrow?
A certain bit, or
tomorrow? Do it tonight if you can. But if you got to set up accounts, then do it tomorrow. Don't wait. You don't want to wait. You FOMO in now. You don't wait until like you're like, oh shit, I should have done it back then. I'm gonna get in now, but it's like at 150K. You don't do it then when it's already 10x from the bottom of a year and a half ago. You should get in now, because again, I think if I'm right, we're gonna be at 92 within the next 6 weeks. So I just don't think it right now isn't a time where you wait. And if you're looking to buy and hold this for at least a year, and that's your intent or longer, then get it now. This Bitcoin is not friendly to people that wait. It's just not. It'll give you maybe a couple of years, right? Like once we hit the bull, you'll have a couple of years where maybe you can get it at a decent price before it takes off again. But it's not, but right before the halving, that's not the time you wait. Bye.
I gotta go, guys. Sorry. Oh,
Bye,
gosh.
Tanner.
Bye, guys.
See you,
Thank
buddy.
you for having me. See ya.
See ya.
He was getting picked anyway, so
let's.
He's so nice. He's like just trying to wait until a good time.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Let me throw this up, Jesse, because you know there's a lot of charts here that suggest that we're not really even close to topping out, and Bitcoin 1.3 trillion right now. I think when we closed off the peak, it was almost higher than silver. It's definitely going to get there when we break through that all-time high. What does that pattern look like? Like we usually, I think it's 1 year or 15 months or something after the halving where this thing really peaks out.
Yeah.
But you know better than I do. So like, what does the history of previous halvings tell us is going to happen next?
So histories of previous halvings tell us it should happen in Q4. That's what we should peak out of 2025, right? So that we have over a year and a half. But I think this time is different. I think we're going to blow our load way before that because we just haven't been this excited, right? So, sorry, these terms are horrible. But I mean, maybe you don't know what I mean, but like,
yeah, we
get too excited. It's
high before the halving. So everything is like dragged forward by at least several months because of
and again, and then there's all these pipes of inflows that can come in. And so I think that we could see a violent uptick. And I think it could end up ending earlier. And I think that also too, I have concerns about war and the economy. I am still like, I might be like heavily invested in making a bunch of money. I don't know what Tevis is dying here, but I have concerns. Blow your load. Oh yeah. Hey, Rocket actually is a really good crypto that people have been buying. I'm not even kidding. You could have made a fortune off of Rocket. One of my friends, Cryptos R Us or whatever, he's this Asian dude. He bought a ton of Rocket and talked about it like on every YouTube video. But he made a bunch of money off of that. So you can get money from all this stuff. I don't remember what we were talking about.
Sorry, I can't.
The length of the cycle, like usually each cycle is a little bit longer, less volatile.
Yeah.
It's for me, I don't know. Like I was guessing before we hit this all-time high that maybe September 2025, maybe August. September is historically weak, so that's a good candidate. It's about the right time. But I don't know. Like it could end earlier. It could be a lot higher than I expect. Every single cycle is a little bit different. But you see the same general trend. And so I don't know like where we'll end up. My guess is at some point we're going to see the last of the 60Ks and maybe we come back. Like this might be like the low point of the next cycle if things get really bad. I mean, who knows? But it's tough to say. Like the big money coming in and hitting that all-time high before the halving is throwing things off. And so we'll see.
What's your thought, Tevis?
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, I recognize that trend of, I've been here before in 2020, 2021. And I recognize that, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. We're too early for it to be this high, for it to be breaking all-time highs. The moment it breaks all-time highs, price discovery is going to drive it higher. And I mean, to your Google Trends graph right there, we're not even at that peak in terms of the search volume. ETFs are just buying up all of the supply more, like they're buying up the daily float essentially every single day. and they
Yeah.
don't really care because they're still in accumulation mode. And so for me, I really thought to myself, okay, well, I added to my Coinbase position. I bought CleanSpark, and I said to myself, okay, these are the ones that I'm going to hold for maybe a year, maybe a year and a half. We'll see how it goes and how violent the cycle gets. And then the other thought I had was eventually around some point in this cycle, I want to possibly sell Solana and ETH and fold that into Bitcoin at some point or another. I know it's going to be less appreciation over time, but I think it just narrows the focus to have like, okay, Bitcoin's all I hold essentially. So by the end
I
of
think
this
what you're,
cycle,
yeah,
the goal is to get out of CleanSpark, get out of Coinbase, get out of Sol, ETH, and just own Bitcoin all the way through.
I think that is one of the smarter things I've heard somebody say who's barely a novice to this and not even through like a couple of cycles. You want to get out of all the other stuff, in my opinion, because when you look at how far they can drop, it's huge. And this time around, Bitcoin will have the blessing of retirees holding it en masse. And so I think that getting out of other stuff completely, and then you can always look at it in the bear. And depending on how the economy goes, I just have a lot of fears about our economy and the potentials of war over the next year. I think that things are going to get sketchier before they get better. And we're going to have tons of money printing. Maybe technology saves us. Maybe things aren't so bad with China and things get better and G gets overthrown or something. They start becoming a demand. All kinds of things can happen that we just don't understand now that can make the world a better place. But I do have fears about that. So I think that between just the sheer fierceness of the market right now and its velocity towards the upside, combined with potential fears that might set in 2025 sometime, I think it could cause this cycle to be premature and top quicker. And I think we're going to have a bunch of ways to figure that out. And here's something I want to throw out there, right? So the reason I've made so much money over time is, and kept it, is because there's always a better deal out there. That people don't realize this, but let's say that you bought Bitcoin at 15,000 and then it gets to 150,000, right? You've made 10x your money, right? You've made 1,000% your money. That is such a huge number. Why, after making 1,000%, would you risk it all for the last 100? Why? Why to have it double one more time to get 100% on whatever you're invested in? Would you risk 1,000% in gains? I think that's pretty foolish. And I think that that's the way you need to think with a cycle. Don't try and time the top. Try and time like 75%, 80% to the top, and be happy with that. And then look for other opportunities, because there are always other opportunities. And you could keep your stack. You can get rid of the shit, get rid of all the multipliers. Because again, miners are a multiplier, maybe 3 to 5x the underlying asset. Options are a multiplier. If you're invested in Hood and Square and PayPal, these are multipliers. As you make money, you want to get rid of multipliers so that you reduce your downside risk, and you want to start locking in to things that are less volatile. And so I think your plan, Tevis, is brilliant for somebody who hasn't been through a few of these. I think that's exactly what you should do.
Right now, PayPal is a multiplier, but only by 1. So it's just,
yeah, it's not. It doesn't go anywhere. It just goes down. Just painful. But again, I could still. So here's the crazy thing about PayPal. It's at what, $58. If it goes up to close to 100 in the next 3 to 4 months, I make between $1.5 and $2 million, or $2.4 million off of it. So it's a pretty good asymmetric bet. I'm down like 48% on it now. So that sucks, right? Lose half your money, lose all your money because it's options. It could just go to dust, right? That's very possible. But I still have the potential of making up to a 20x return on it. So I don't know, or 10x at least now. I guess it was 20 before. It's probably 10 now. So I'll take those kind of bets, man. I bet in a lot of different directions. And when you're betting asymmetric, when you're betting that Bitcoin can 10x, when you're betting that your options can 10x, and you've got a few of them out there, if you hit bat 40% of the time, you're going to be rich.
So is that by the way, is that a shirt that is new to this cycle, or have you had that a while, Jesse?
No, my wife bought it for me. It's Crypto Dad, just like a regular dad. Let me see. Let me read it. Just way smarter.
So you guys both said something really smart. It's just you kind of know what your goals are with it. Like everybody can have different goals. You can say, you know, I'm not going to even be in this crypto thing. It's like I'm that way with NFTs. Like I'm never going to touch them. Just period. I think that they're horrible and a scam. There's some legitimacy, but whatever. But you know, as far as stocks, as far as crypto, I have in mind what I want it to do, what I'd like it to do. I'll sell before what I think it can do, and I'll probably keep some longer too. And but you know, I have a specific goal in mind, and so if you hit your goals, if you're, you know, I watched. Oh man, I can't think of the movie, the GameStop Robin Hood movie.
Oh yeah.
Dumb Money.
What is it? Dumb Money. Yeah.
So some of those people sold, but you know, a lot of them were, you know, broke, and I don't know how. I guess the government gave them money or whatever, so they invested and they maxed out cards and did stupid things. It's like, if you're doing that and you get life-changing money, like think about beforehand is like, okay, well, what do you need? Like for me, you know, back then during that cycle, it was like, if we get the money that allows us to pay off our house in full, I'm cashing out. I don't care about whatever going to whatever price. Like that's our cash out point. Didn't have.
We've been in the market long enough to know, Roy, that there's so many opportunities out there. There's like thousands of stocks. I mean, if you go into crypto, there's thousands of coins. Every day something is, you know, doubling, tripling, whatever. For a lot of those people, it was their first exposure to the market. And it got to a point where they really viewed it as like, this is my one chance to essentially make it and hit that goal. And they want to squeeze it for all they could. Whereas for us, we're like, sweet, like I can scalp 50% off this or 100% off that because I know that there's going to be a tomorrow and there's going to be other things that are going to move.
Yeah. I do think it's smart though. Like Roy was saying, it's have goals, set like figure out, and don't try and get every penny. Because again, I was super guilty of that when I didn't know shit about what I was doing. I didn't even know what a halving was. And I was up $275,000 and then I was down 46 a couple of years later in the red. So don't be an idiot. Don't be that stupid Dogecoin millionaire. If he's a millionaire again, great. He's still an idiot if he doesn't sell that stuff this cycle. And he's going to be doubly an idiot. I can't even imagine anybody that will want to hang out with him if he makes it 2 cycles and isn't a millionaire. But like, don't be that guy. Don't get greedy. It's going to be so easy to get greedy. And the market right now, just the way it's brewing, it is feeding off of greed, and it will continue to for longer than people realize. And there will be a point where people think, and again, I can see the narrative in the future for Bitcoin already. This cycle is different. It's never going down again. That happens every cycle too. And it's going to come again this time as well. And there's going to be people that change their opinions and have their targets set like Roy's talking about. And then they'll be like, but you know, paying off the house, God, wouldn't it be nice to get an upgrade? We could rent this one out, buy another fucking house. Like, don't let your goals change substantially and then risk everything for that last 100%. I totally agree. Have goals, stick to them, and look for other opportunities. There are always other opportunities that will be safer come the end of this cycle. Not that you shouldn't still hold Bitcoin, but don't hold the multipliers and search for safety, preserve wealth. Preserving wealth is one of the most important things you can do. It's not just about making money.
I feel like that's one of the perfect ways to wrap this episode, unless either of you gentlemen have anything else you want to ask or say or mention.
I'm so tired of talking. No, I'm good.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is, you know, crypto, there's risk, and no matter what you invest in. Only invest what you can afford to invest. Don't do what, like Jesse mentioned earlier about, like, you know, doing credit card stuff or, you know, borrowing money or going
get rich off of it. But yeah, don't do it
unless your financial position allows you to. Like, if you have a bunch of money that's not free, you know, you do you. But be careful with that. Like, if you didn't get any other lesson from the previous cycle, don't use margin, don't use debt. You can pay off big, but it could ruin your freaking life.
Don't use margin, don't use leverage. People that use leverage, luckily, like none of you guys push that shit. There's YouTubers that are like, hey, go 10x, 50x. It's like, just watch the money disappear. Don't, like, Warren Buffett has a saying about that. Like, the greatest ways to lose money are like women, like not paying your taxes and leverage. And so like make sure you control those things.
Even better way to end it. Thanks everybody for being here. 250 of you.
Cool.
I mean, Jesse's channel is amazing. I follow it all the time for the market closes, just going on the live streams. Really insightful stuff. And I mean, I was saying this backstage before we hopped on, like one of the reasons I think that's attributable to your level of growth on YouTube and on Twitter for that matter has been just your transparency throughout this whole process. And I really appreciate it and appreciate you hopping on.
Oh, happy to, man. I love you guys. You have a good night.
All right. See you, everybody.